Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Micah and today I have a book unhaul for you. I went over all of my books during the Christmas period and reorganized my shelves a little bit and also decided to get rid of a couple of books. There are going to be three categories here. There are going to be books that I've read, enjoyed, thought were okay, but that I don't see myself ever rereading again, and it's just time for them to go. There's also a couple of books that I tried reading a couple of years ago. I've even tried multiple times, but that for some reason just didn't stick with me, that I DNF'd, and so I'm finally getting rid of those. And then there's also a category, sadly, of books that once upon a time I gathered, put on my shelves, but by now I'm no longer interested in them, and that's why those have to go. So those are the three categories of books, or like reasons why I'm getting rid of books. I still have plenty to go about, as you can see behind me. So I will not be stumped for any reading material anytime soon. And I also bought quite a few books over 2018. I haven't done a haul since the beginning of last year, so that's definitely a video I also would like to do to show you the new books that I've acquired in the past year. But for now, I thought we could do an unhaul and show you all of the books that I've decided to declutter off of these shelves. So before we get into anything, you should know that I'm not getting rid of like a ginormous amount of books. Last year, right before I moved, I definitely wanted to get rid of a lot more books. I got rid of like, I think about 100 that I was just no longer interested in, that I'd either read or whatever was going on with them. But that was before I moved, and this is just a declutter that I'm doing just to keep my shelves a bit more organized and to not just fill them with all the books I've ever read, because not all of the books I've read I will want to go back to. So that's why let's start with the biggest pile first, and that is all books that I've read, most of them in the past year, and that I feel that I just no longer need on my shelves. So the first book that I'm getting rid of because of that reason is Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep. This is one of the like OG detective novels of like the 1930s. It's like sort of like a genre classic, you could say. And I actually saw someone reading this on the plane and thought, that looks interesting. So then I looked it up and I found it for like £2 or £3 when I was in London last year. And I decided I think I read this over the summer, I think. And yeah, this is a good book. It's a bit more slower paced than I like my detectives to be, but that's probably because of the time period in which it is set and it was written, so there's a different aesthetic to it. I also thought that quite a lot of the things that are going on in the story, because this is a couple of decades old, some of the technology and some of the like things that they do here, were probably very easy to understand at the time. Like some of those links have been lost because we just don't have that around anymore. So that's why this book was sometimes a bit difficult to understand. But in terms of a detective, it was still really nice, and it was definitely a good whodunit to see. And it's I can see why people like this as like a genre classic. Now, a few books I'm getting rid of are like novellas and short stories in series that I was reading. This is Cruel Crown, which comes with the Red Queen series, and I believe it contains 2 short stories, or maybe 3, about like side characters that you find in the series. And I liked it. I really enjoy the covers of these. But that's not a reason to keep it. I read it, I enjoyed it, but I would rather go back to the series again, and this novella, I'm not too fussed about it. A book that I've had for years, this was a gift from my friend at university. This is Ruthless Rhymes for Heartless Holmes by Harry Graham. And it's like a pretty fun sort of thing, but it's one of those, it's very thin, so you just kind of browse through it, and it's sort of like limericks and those kind of things. So it was good while it lasted, but I haven't looked at this book in years, and so it's time to go. I'm also getting rid of series or parts of series. Case in point, the last 2 books in the Divergent series by Veronica Roth. Don't get me wrong, I like this series, but I think that out of the 3 books in the series, I enjoyed the first one the most, especially this last one, Allegiant. I thought, whoa. Insurgent was okay, but I kind of felt it was like that in-between book that sort of, you know, you need to read it to get onto the last one, but not much really goes on in it. At least that's how I feel now after a couple of years. So I'm keeping Divergent on my shelves, but I'm getting rid of the last 2 books in the series. More series then, and that's the entire Raven Boy's Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I read this. I think I started reading it at the end of 2017 and I finished it early 2018. And I enjoyed the series as a whole, but I really felt that some of the books in this series I didn't like at all. The last one, for instance, was not my favorite. I quite liked the first one, but it was too much, I don't know, Twilight in Virginia. It was very sort of like love triangle. It has all of the YA tropes that I don't like. So that's why this is a series I know I will never get back to. So that's why this has to go. A book that was gifted to me for my birthday was Gillian Barnes' The Sense of an Ending. And I read this last year because it was a nice thin one. And I was like, let's see if I can get a little bit closer to my Goodreads goal. And then it's always good to have a couple of thin books handy. This was a very enjoyable book. I do have to say that with the characters, like, I felt that I couldn't really connect to the story all that well. I really enjoyed the writing of this, though. It's a beautifully written book, so I definitely appreciate it for that reason. And it did win the Man Booker Prize in 2011, so that tells you something, right? It's a good book, but I've read it, and I sort of now know what's going to happen, so I don't think I will ever reread this. Maybe later on in life I want to revisit it, but if I want to read it 20 years from now, I don't need to keep it on my shelves for like the next 20 years. More novellas and short stories in a series. These two books came in the Lunar Chronicles series. I read the whole thing, including these two. This is Fairest, which is the backstory for like the Queen on the Moon, Lavanna, I think her name is, and Stars Above. I honestly don't remember what this is about. I think these are just a bunch of like short stories. I did really enjoy this because it really gave you a lot of backstory to this character that seems to be very mean and evil, but of course she has her reasons, and that's why I did really enjoy that. And then, yeah, but again, the series itself, I think I may want to go back to at some point in time, because I did really enjoy it. I especially liked Cress, so that's the third book in the series, and these were good to read, sort of like in between, but for now, I've read them, I know what's going to happen, so I don't really need these anymore. And then we have Rachel Joyce, The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Frey. And this is one of those books, again, I saw someone on the train reading this, and then I looked it up on Goodreads and I thought, oh, that might be something that I enjoy reading. It's about an old guy who wants to write a letter to an old friend, and then he pushes himself to walk to the end of the street to mail this letter himself, because usually his wife does everything for him. And then he's at the post box and he's like, oh, I might as well just walk a little further. And then he keeps walking. And then during his walk, he decides to walk all the way to Scotland, where this lady friend of his is. And it becomes this like really big thing. And this was a very enjoyable read. It's quite endearing, quite adorable. And it was a good one, but again, one that once you've read it, you don't really need to go back to it. I have a colleague who was interested in reading this, so I might just pass it on to her. And then we have a book that I read this past year and that I didn't really enjoy. It was The Clockwork Dynasty by Daniel H. Wilson. This is a book that I put in my worst books of 2018. This is a steampunk novel, and I really want to try steampunk and like sort of get into the genre, but I feel that most of it isn't really well written. So far I've read like 2 or 3 and I was disappointed in all of them. So if you have any good steampunk recommendations for me, please let me know, because I do really enjoy that sort of like steampunk vibe. I really enjoy that, but this book just, it wasn't very well written. I've read it and will never go back to it again. And then we move on to this stack of books, and these are the books that I've started reading at some point in my life and that I just never finished. I DNF'd some of these I DNF'd a long while ago. The first one that I'd like to show you is New York by Edward Rutherford. This author has a lot of these like super big books, and then one of them is about New York. He has one on London. I think he has one about Paris and Berlin. And it's pretty much, it chronicles sort of the history of the entire city, and I really like historical fiction, so I thought that this would be something I might enjoy. But I felt that the chronological aspect of this, where it sort of starts with like swampland and Native Americans, and then it sort of should go towards like everything that happened in the next like 400 or 500 years. It sounds like a really cool premise, but I thought this was so slow paced. It literally, like, the first scene was like on a boat in a swamp, and you have no clue who the characters are, you have no clue where it might go. The only thing you know is that it will chronicle the history of New York, and I just found it was it read too much like a history book rather than an actual novel, so that's why I'm getting rid of this. Another book that I tried reading is Stephen Fry in America. I really enjoy Stephen Fry's books, but this is the companion to his TV series, Stephen Fry in America. And I watched that and thought, hey, there's a book about it. So let me just read that book. But what it ended up being was just a sort of like page by page description of what is already going on in the TV series. So I read like the first 50 pages and then I was like, no, I should not read this because I already watched the TV series. If you don't have the opportunity to watch the TV series, read the book. If you've already watched that, don't read the book. And then we have a couple of like literary fiction, you could say, that I didn't enjoy. Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I sort of like absurdist kind of crazy books most of the time, but this one, I think I read the first like 100 or 150 pages of this. I quit around that mark because the entire book is a catch-22, and that's sort of like the point of the book. But after reading about a third of this, I was like, I get it. I don't need the rest of this. It was completely ludicrous, and I can see why some people enjoy this, but it just didn't really inspire me to keep on reading. And then we have this book. This is Ian McEwan's Saturday. A friend of mine recommended this to me. He said he really enjoyed it, and usually his recommendations are quite on point. So I was excited to get to this. I tried reading this 3 times. 3 times, and every single time I got a little bit further into the story. So I first read like 50 pages and then like 75 and then like 100 or 120. I think I read about half of this and then I was just like, no, this is just not my thing. It's very slow, and apparently something happens in this book, and apparently I read the thing that happens in the book that sort of makes it exciting. But for a book that isn't that big, I think this is only like just over 300 pages, maybe even less. And I think that for a book to then take 140 pages to get to the point, it was just a bit much for me. So Ian McEwan has a couple of books that I do really enjoy, so I do enjoy this author, but Saturday wasn't my favorite. And then the final stack of books I'm going to breeze through because these are all books that were on my shelf and that I no longer want to read. So I've never read these, so I don't really know what most of these are about apart from a blurb. The first one is an adapted version of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. This is great if you want to learn English, but I already know English, so I should just buy like the actual book because it's very thin and it has all these word lists. Maybe one of my students might like this, I'm not sure, but this is not one that I want to personally read. I have here a P.G. Wodehouse, Do Butlers Burgle Banks. It's not the Jeeves series itself, but apparently his books are hilarious. It's just not something that really appeals to me, so not keeping that. Then I got this book, The Kleine Mindfulness op het Werk. So it's a dummy sort of series about mindfulness, apparently. I think I got this for a birthday as well, but I think that I browsed through it and most of the tips I already tried to apply in my daily life. So it's one of those books, you browse through it, you find the information you want and need, and then you never really look at it again. So that's why this has to go. Got quite a bit of fiction here as well. I've got Wicked by Gregory Maguire. I think this is also the inspiration for the musical, or first there was the musical and then you got the book. I really enjoy the musical, but again, as with the Stephen Fry book, I think I'll just remember the musical and I don't really need to read this. This is P.J. Tracy, Want to Play, Hide and Seek and Kill. So this is sort of like a murder mystery kind of thing. I don't really read thrillers all that often. I find them usually a little too predictable. Like I read, what's her name again? Gillian Flynn, that really, really famous book by her. I forget the title. That's how much it inspired me. I knew what the premise of that book was going to be about a third of the way in. So I find them a little too predictable. And it's not because I'm super smart. It's just that if I read these kind of books, I want to stay in the dark until the end. And then it's like this big reveal. I love that. I like watching like crime series like Criminal Minds and CSI on TV. I like sort of like the visual aspect of it, but in a book, if I really, especially also if I don't like the detective or the main character that's in there, and this is just one of those books that I once picked up because I wanted to give it a try because I thought I liked it, but no. Then I have a book that I have no clue what it's about. This is Merida Happens by Stephen Clark. Sounded like fun, but I'm not even sure how this ended up on my shelves. Then we have a Dan Brown book, The Lost Symbol. This is one that I've had on my shelf for years, back when he was like the it author of the moment. I read the first 4 books he ever wrote, and I enjoyed those. I quite enjoyed the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, but I'm just a bit done with Robert Langdon. And we're nearing the end here. This is Edward Albee, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is a play. And I picked this up when I was still working at my library, knowing that this was sort of like a classic. But I actually never got around to reading this at all. And it's just not something I'm currently interested in reading, so this needs to go. And then we have 2 more books in a series, Anne Rice's Vampire series. It starts with Interview with the Vampire. Then you have The Vampire Lestat in the second book, and Queen of the Damned is the 3rd one in the series. I picked this up, like all 3 books in one go at the time, and while I quite enjoyed Interview with the Vampire, I kind of just never had any interest in continuing the rest of the series. So again, just like with Divergent, I'll keep the first one because I can always go back to it. That's a classic in my book, but these ones, nah. Not too fussed about them. So there you have it. Those are all of the books that I'm no longer going to be keeping on these shelves. I'm definitely going to be passing them on to friends and family, and the ones that I can't like give to people, I will just I think I'll take it to like a local thrift shop. That's usually what I do with books. I never really throw them away. I always bring them to a thrift shop because maybe someone else might enjoy some of these. Who knows? So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. And I would love for you to subscribe to my channel if you want to. I try to make some more bookish content on here because it's content that I personally really enjoy, even though these videos don't get a whole lot of views, but hey, this is my channel. I can do what I want, right? So yeah, thank you very much for watching if you did watch this, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!